Opening credits. Kill Order. A Ménage Shifter Romance. By Selena Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Chapter 1. And this is him trying to get at the cookies. Damien's voice held a weary laugh as he held out the phone with the picture clear on the screen. A young boy with pale brown skin and a cloud of curly brown hair balancing precariously on a kitchen counter. He actually did fall the other day and split his chin open, and you should have seen me. I lost it. There was regret there. It looks real cute now, but man, can he be a brat sometimes. Usually when we're trying to sleep. Jack stared at the photo, trying to swallow away the lump in his throat. Damien spoke of Liam with weariness and the cheerful irreverence of a parent, eager to remind Jack of the absolutely infuriating parts of raising a child. Jack knew that his Omega was trying to make him feel better, remind him that he was able to sleep through the night and enjoy grown-up pursuits in peace, but there was no disguising the overwhelming love in his voice when he spoke of Liam. Love that was too close an echo of Jack's own. He lay awake at night and thought of his family, Imogen singing to Liam as he drifted off to sleep, Damien holding her as they too fell asleep in their big bed. It had been difficult enough when Imogen was pregnant, and Jack had wanted, more than anything, to be the one who got her chips at 2 a.m. and held her hand when she worried about the pregnancy, and
censored
her to assure her of her beauty, even when she felt overwhelmed and impossibly big. He had thought it couldn't get any worse than that. He was wrong. Every time he saw a picture of the three of them, or of Liam staring out at him with Imogen's gorgeous features and Damien's kindness and Jack's own self-assurance, even at 2 years old, Jack wanted to scream his fury and sadness at the world. This was his son, his child by his mate, and he should be with his family. It was tearing him apart inside every day, and it had been for 3 years. Damien sensed it now. He always knew what Jack was feeling. You should get back, he said lightly. He knew Jack wouldn't want to speak of it. Alyssa will be waiting. Jack's second in command was a woman of endless patience and prodigious intelligence. Jack worried about what she might see. He only shrugged, eyes distant. Jack, it's going to be okay. Damien's voice was soft. How? Jack heard the roughness in his voice and wanted to scream. How? I should be there, letting you two sleep sometimes. He should know my face. I should know you three are safe because I see you every day. My heart. He stopped himself. Is breaking. Those kinds of words had never come easily to him. Once, Damien had been there to try to teach him to be softer, kinder. Without his Omega, Jack felt lost, and without his family he felt broken. We're safe, Damien told him simply. That's what matters, isn't it? All of us, no one's taken you down, and Imogen and Liam are doing well. I'm well, you know me. He flashed his trademark grin, but there was strain there. It's not enough, Jack said finally. It isn't. Then what? What are you going to do? Now it was Damien who was angry. Are you going to expose us to the pack? After all this time? Yes, Jack said after a moment. What? Damien was trying to be incredulous, tell him how stupid it was, but there was no denying the hope in his voice. Jack reminded himself that while Damien got to go to sleep beside Imogen every night, he was now without a pack. He and Jack had split their life between them, and both of them were suffering for it, as were Imogen and Liam. Damien was shaking now. Jack, can you do this? I'll talk to the elders, Jack told him. Now. Tonight. I won't give them details, but I'll talk to them. He stood trying to seize the moment. Tell them I love them? Always, Damien said easily. And? The sentiment stuck in his throat, and he wavered. But the sentiment came out anyway. Damien? You've kept me sane with this. Showing me pictures. I know they're safe with you. And I'm not just doing this to have them back. Damien's blue eyes met his. The man was silent. I'm not really an alpha without you, Jack said simply. I need you back too. Damien pulled him into a rough hug, and Jack felt the raw need in his omega. Damien was equally as lost when they were not together. He only nodded, however, stepping back. "Let me know what they say." And he was gone, disappearing into the night, to a house even Jack didn't know how to find. Jack watched the darkness for a moment, imagining Damien getting home to Imogen and Liam, and then turned and made his way quickly to the pack's headquarters. He wanted to have the talk as soon as he could, but he showered quickly and thoroughly, scrubbing the soap roughly on his skin to take away any trace of Damien's scent. The elders might not notice it, but Jack could not take the chance. If anyone knew that Damien was still alive. He dressed quickly and made his way to the elders' chambers, surprised to see them assembled already. A warning thrilled in his blood, and he took a moment to study their familiar faces. Shifters tended to die young in pack wars and fights, offering their services as hitmen and guards. Those who survived were canny and strong, and it was a foolish alpha who refused to listen to them. Jack had coexisted easily with them for the past years, and had hoped for their acceptance, but something told him that this was not going to be as easy as that. "We're glad you're here." Edward, one of the oldest, leaned back in his chair. "And I'm glad you're here," Jack returned. His smile was genuine, and he nodded his head deeply to show respect. "I wanted to speak to you all about taking a mate." They looked at one another, quick glances speaking volumes, and Jack felt his blood run cold. They couldn't know. "Jack?" Delia spoke now, her voice low and smooth despite her age. Her gray eyes were pale and commanding in a deep brown face, and she waited for him to look at her before she continued. "We would caution you before you speak," she told him simply. "Think carefully about what you wish to ask of us." Jack stood still and quiet, his heart pounding. They knew. But how? "You have been a good leader," Edward sighed quietly. The others nodded. "You keep the young ones safe," Delia concurred. "We have been pleased to see an alpha who seeks safety, and not simply glory. The pack wars hurt us deeply, and we are glad to see those days behind us." Jack nodded. "I would ask you. But you have long wanted something you know you cannot have." Delia cut him off, her voice like ice. Jack stopped, his eyes closing. "You know Delia is right," Edward sighed quietly. When Jack opened his eyes, he saw compassion in the other man's eyes, but no softness. He should go. He should accept it and go. He could not. "I have not shirked any of my duties," Jack reminded them. He looked up to meet their eyes. "Save that you have not taken a mate, and given this pack an heir." When Jack moved to protest, Edward lifted a single finger to silence him. "I would think very carefully before you speak, Jack. Very carefully. I would think carefully, before suggesting that you had done something we could not accept." Jack turned away. It was to admit weakness, something he should not show them, but he could not keep his face still. He knew they would see his despair. His love would be all too clear, there would be nothing to protect Imogen and Liam, and Damien. "We were all young once," Delia said smoothly. She spoke like the grandmother she was, so warmly that Jack could picture her baking a pie as she talked, something he was sure Delia had never done in her life. For a moment he felt like a child, protected and guided. "We have all made mistakes, Jack. All of us here know that a moment of weakness is not the true measure of any of us. And what if? Our measure will be taken in how we resist such weakness," she finished, speaking over him once more. She spoke with the self-assurance of a scientist, reciting the laws of nature. "There are things which cannot be tolerated. Things which must be left behind. They say," Jack said as smoothly as he could, "that the mating instinct is never wrong." His blood was beating in his ears. "Indeed." Delia's voice was like stone. "Which is why we are sure that your mating instinct will lead you soon to a suitable mate. Someone like perhaps Alyssa." Chapter 2. Alyssa? Jack stared at her. "You can't be serious." The look the elders shared said that they had discussed this at length. That they had decided what Jack should say to this pronouncement. Clearly, he had said the wrong thing. "Why not?" It was Samuel who spoke now. The older man's black hair had gone almost entirely white, and his honey-colored skin was lined with age now. He was still strong, however, and his eyes pierced Jack. "They say the mating sense is never wrong," Jack repeated. He swallowed and looked around at them. "Don't they?" They were silent. "And I do not want to mate with Alyssa." Still they said nothing. "Didn't all of you teach me that the mating sense is never?" "We also taught you from when you were little that a leader does what they must." Delia was beginning to sound displeased. "Did you forget that lesson, perhaps?" "I forgot nothing." "Perhaps you do," Samuel told him. "Or you would not discount Alyssa." "No." Jack rounded on him. "Alyssa has been your right hand since Damien died." The hesitation was minute, but Jack heard it with a stab of foreboding. Samuel's face did not even flicker. "Though many of the younger set favor violence and recklessness, she has ever held to your vision of a peaceful, secure tribe. She teaches the littlest ones to be cautious. She talks sense into those who might challenge you or leave the pack to lead lives of danger. She questions you when it is right, and always acquiesces to your judgment. You know that all of this is true." Jack looked down and away, his heart twisting. He did know it. His words had indeed betrayed him. Alyssa was a woman any alpha would be pleased to have for a mate, unless he were mated to another. She was kind to the youngest, respectful of the elders, mindful of tradition. She was a strong fighter, uncompromising in her defense of the pack. And she was beautiful, with red gold hair and features that would not have been out of place in a Renaissance painting. Alyssa herself had never pushed to be his mate. Others had wondered, and Jack had brushed away their questions. He heard Alyssa do the same. Now he wondered with a sinking dread whether she had truly believed they would not mate, or if she had been waiting for him to do the sensible thing. Alyssa was sensible. Alyssa was fierce in her absolute loyalty to the pack, and she would, Jack knew, accept him as a mate if the elders deemed it right, and even if they did not. As two leaders within the pack, their mating made sense. It bound their adherents together, it solidified Jack's power. What Alyssa wanted romantically, Jack knew, would not even enter the equation for her. But that was not how he lived. It was not something he could accept for either of them. "I feel nothing for her," he said finally, quietly. He could not allow this to happen. He could not let them do this. "You must ask yourself if that matters," Edward countered. Jack's head turned too sharply, and a few of the elders growled softly, reminding him of more than human words could say. "Remember your place," the growls said. "You are young. We have seen all of this before. We have lived it. Do you truly feel nothing for her?" Samuel asked, almost kindly. "You are a true alpha of this pack. We have seen your care to the weakest. You are a second father to every child here. You have been kind, strengthening even those who you know will seek to challenge you one day. You seek the strength of all of us without fear for your own glory. An alpha cannot do that without love for his pack. And Alyssa is one who has ever been by your side. Can you tell me truly that you have no affection for her?" "Of course I have affection for her." Jack spread his hands. His head was moving without his volition, shaking over and over. "Alyssa is everything a man could want in a mate." "There." Samuel inclined his head. "Therefore?" "But I do not want her for my mate." Jack felt the words come out of him, dragged from a part of himself he could not deny. "I have found no one," Delia said flatly, her voice rising. "You have not found anyone, Jack." His pride was rising, the urge to show them that he was alpha. "I am not a fool." "Then you must know this." Delia's voice was harsh now. "You must be aware that a pack can only flourish when its members adhere to tradition. Is it not so?" "Is it?" "It is. And were an alpha not to adhere to tradition, he would be open to challenge. Challenges that would weaken the fabric of this tribe, by stealing either our leader or our young. Think, Jack, before your defiance costs us those you could have chosen to spare. It is their choice to challenge or not. And it is their choice as well," she said, her voice wintry, "to protect this pack by purging those who are unworthy of its blood. The world seemed to turn upside down. Jack was sure his face went gray. He wanted to throw up. He could see it all in her words, his own pack flowing up the stairs to the apartment he had built up in his mind. Damien and Imogen playing with Liam, unaware, and the door bursting open. A shifter would seek a new mate if his mate died. Everyone knew that. And so, if they could not force him to renounce her, they would remove her. Remove her, and kill the child they were so sure should not have his blood. And Damien, the one who had aided and abetted him, Damien would die as well. Jack would be given the choice, accept the slaughter of his family, or be killed himself. Certain things have been forgiven, Delia told him. She might look shaken by his horror, but she would not bend. As we said before, mistakes are natural to all of us. It is not beyond understanding that a man, even an alpha, would bend to temptation. We have all failed at one time or another. Forgiveness, however, has been earned. Your actions have showed us that this pack is more important to you than the feelings you know you cannot indulge. What if instinct leads us to another future? Jack knew he should say nothing, but he could not hold the words back. Tradition has aided, but I have flouted it before. I swore that we would not just be creatures of violence, following the paths we had learned to tread. We are not hitmen. We are not brutes or brawlers or assassins. We do not take part in the wars that were once our way of life. Those changes have brought us stability, you know that as well as I do. What if this, too, ushers us to a new future? What if it shows us the way to a new life, a better life, a more secure life? What if it is good for the pack? Silence surrounded them. Jack thought he heard a sound behind him and turned sharply, but there was no one there. He
censored
his head, listening, but only silence greeted him now. A low growl escaped him, and he turned back to the elders. We are sure we do not know what you refer to. Edward was the one who spoke at last. It is impossible that an alpha would betray his tribe. It is impossible as well that he would allow his own feelings to imperil those he might care for. All of those he might care for. It was not flouting tradition to lead us away from the depths to which we had fallen, Samuel added. Such were not always our ways. You led us back to a path of safety. But anything else, the sort of deviation I shudder to think you might mean, would be too much to bear. Such has never been allowed. It is dangerous, Delia concurred. The other elders murmured. A leader who fell to such depths and tried to make others follow him would not make a fit leader for this tribe. He would show his blood to be poisoned, unfit. And poisoned blood must be purged. We do not allow the unworthy to survive, it has always been our way. This is how we have survived. We do not tolerate those whose talents cannot be controlled, you know this. It is a matter of everyone's safety, the needs of the many outweighing those of the few. You have always known this. Do not let momentary weakness blind you to what you know must happen. We are willing to overlook things that may have happened. Things that may exist. Samuel was now as cold as the other two. But only if they do not become a threat. Who measures what is a threat? He should have stayed silent, but he could not bear to any longer. The pack, and the soul of the pack, as with the mating instinct, is never wrong. The threat was clear. Blood was shed in his voice, a promise of ruthless slaughter, and Jack pushed his way out of the room to stand in the hallway, shaking, his hands clenched and the urge to scream his fury in his voice. Would he bend? Could he put the interest of the pack? No. No. It was no longer about what he wanted. It was about the truth that he could not deny. Whatever they wanted from him, Imogen was his mate. He was destined to protect her until the day he died, and to give his life for it. They could take this from him only with his death. He looked around himself once more, checking the hallways for watchers, and heard nothing. He set off down the hallways that led to the outside. He had denied his heart for too long. He would not do so again. Chapter 3. He had sworn that he would never go to Imogen, would never take the chance that someone could follow him, smell her, learn her scent, and see the child that should not exist. No. Jack shook his head. He was done believing that Liam was a mistake, that he had been led astray. Too long, he had denied his heart, and allowed himself to pay lip service to the outdated ideals that kept him from embracing Imogen. He had told himself that tradition meant the others could not understand, could not accept her and Liam into the pack. He would find a way, he knew that now. He had become alpha and proved himself 100 times over. Whatever instinct led him to Imogen was not wrong. He picked up Damien's trail near their meeting place, looking over his shoulder once or twice to ensure that he was not being followed. But whatever the elders had threatened, no one was coming after him. Perhaps they thought he was going to say goodbye. Fools. Tradition-bound fools. He followed the scent into an apartment building in the heart of the city, weaving through the crowds and prying his arm loose from drunk bachelorettes. He hated crowds, as did Damien, but where better to hide the scent of a hybrid and her child? Damien had done well. It took all of Jack's concentration to find the correct building, and he was up the several flights of stairs in a moment. When he pounded on the door of the apartment, he felt almost sick with anticipation. It had been so long since he had seen her. When the door opened, her mouth fell open, and he heard his breath leave him in a whoosh. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Raising a toddler had put circles under her eyes, but even that only emphasized how queenly she was. She held herself like a true mate to an alpha. She had been born to lead. The proud set of her chin, the softness and determination in those full lips, the way she stood tall even with exhaustion evident in her bearing. And those gorgeous eyes were fixed on his face, desperation and longing and love and pride warring in her.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Chapter 4.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
I tried to forget you. Something he couldn't have said before this. He thought she might take offense, but her eyes said she understood all too well. I tried to forget you too, she whispered back. They heard the footsteps at the same time, and looked over to see Damien leaning against the wall. His eyes were dark, arms crossed over his.
Censored.
And there was.
Censored.
Tangling with hope in his eyes. Did you? At Jack's look of desperation he broke off. Then why? He asked quietly. Jack set Imogen on the ground, but he could not bring himself to let her go. He bent his head against her shoulder. He had to struggle to find the words. I couldn't live apart from myself anymore. For a moment, none of them spoke. And then Damien held out his hand to Imogen, and she laced her fingers with his, other hand curling around Jack's. They drew him into the apartment, into a bedroom that seemed more familiar to him than his own. He could smell them both, and he wanted nothing more than to return here night after night.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
None of them spoke for a long moment, enjoying the moment too much to ruin it by speaking of what had to happen now. But the moment was already slipping away, and it was not long before Damien spoke. Should I come back with you? No. Jack rubbed his forehead. He sighed, staring up at the ceiling. No, give me a few days. There'll be a few challenges. I'm not going to let you get challenged. Imogen sat up, her eyes wide. Jack? I'm not going to live apart from you anymore, Jack told her softly. They know you exist. How long until someone decides to do something? Every day until this is resolved, I'll live in fear for all three of you. Let me fight for you now. She bent her head against his, and he felt her fear. He
censored
her softly. I'll be all right, he promised them both. He left before they could see his fear. Chapter 5. He was still in the shower when he heard movement in the room outside. He froze. Who is it? Just me. Alyssa's voice was careless. Finish your shower, I'll be out here. Frowning, Jack washed himself all over for a third time, thanking heaven for cologne and scented soap, and dried himself off. His clothes were already washing, and he knew it was only his own paranoia that could still smell Imogen and Damien on him. He raised his eyebrows at Alyssa when he came out, towel wrapped around his waist. What's going on? He left the door to his bedroom cracked as he changed. I was talking to Edward. Her voice was as matter-of-fact as usual, but there was a strange, searching quality to it. He said you might have something to talk to me about. He paused, considering. How much should he tell her? She would learn everything in time anyway. He considered. What else did Edward tell you? He rolled up the sleeves of his shirt as he came out, settling onto the arm of one of the armchairs. She studied him for a moment, and he reflected on how beautiful she truly was. With a tiny waist and ample curves, she was many men's fantasy, and a good few women's too. Her hair was bound back in a loose braid, draped over her shoulder in a fall of red gold, and her blue-green eyes were long-lashed, her lips a perfect pink pout. For a moment, he was amused by the elder's consternation at his refusal. Alyssa truly was a vision of perfection. They must wonder why he refused to mate with her, and when those blue-green eyes slid away from his, he realized she knew their plans and that she shared the same questions they did. He resisted the urge to sigh. They shouldn't have told her. I guessed before they told me, she told him, looking back in time to see his frustration. They've wanted it for a while, haven't they? I was young to be a second in command, but they've never argued for you to pick anyone else. He crossed his arms, sighing and nodding. He should have seen this coming months ago, in truth. The elders had been angling for it for a while, and now that he thought of it, he remembered the number of times they recommended young women to go with him on patrols. They had been trying to get him mated since Damien left, and he had steadfastly refused to see it. This had been a long time coming. Alyssa. I know. She crossed her legs and sat up, self-possessed. You do? He tried to keep an instinctive dislike from his voice. He should have been impressed by her self-possession, but all he could see was a poor facsimile of Imogen's natural elegance. Alyssa was, in many ways, still a child, still following the rules and hoping for things to go her way. What do you know? Though he didn't want to know. But she surprised him. I know I'm not your choice, she clarified. Her eyes met his, and she gave a little shrug. I know. There's no reason for you to pretend. I don't know what to say. He really didn't. I don't need details. She held up her palms. I just want you to know, you won't ever have any jealousy from me. I'll do what's best for the pack. Always. She thought he was going to go through with it. The thought was like a shower of ice water down his back. He froze, staring at her, and saw the test in her eyes. What was she testing? Warning bells went off in his head. Alyssa. He held up a hand when she would have spoken. You and I both know that would be a bad idea. Do we? She was suddenly cool, her voice almost a snarl. She swallowed hard, and when she spoke again, she was calm and collected once more. You're the alpha. I'm the most respected female, outside of the elders. I know that, you know that. Let's not have any pretending between the two of us. I told you I don't need details, and I don't. But you know that with me, you would have a mate who knows the laws of the pack. Who would fight for us? Who would obey you? His revulsion was so strong that he had to force himself not to order her out of the room. Who would obey you? Did he look like a man who needed his mate to obey him? But as much as he wanted to deny it, the picture she painted, however crudely, was tempting. The elders would leave Imogen and Damien alone, the pack wouldn't be threatened by something new. Everything would be as it had been, peaceable and quiet, and that had been killing him. He saw the pictures of Liam in his mind's eye. That was his heir, a bright child with shining eyes, and Jack was sure his talent at shifting. And if he wasn't a shifter, what would that hurt? The children of alphas had no claim to the title themselves, and the pack itself was strong. Liam and Imogen would hurt nothing. I can't do that, he told Alyssa. You know that. You knew that when you came in here. Why not? She settled back in the chair, arms crossed. A quiet, easy solution. A good mate. The pack would benefit. It would be to betray you, he told her. We aren't meant to mate together, you know that. He saw it in a flash, she wanted to. She didn't have the instinct, but she wanted to be the alpha's mate. She wanted the prestige, she wanted that place in the tribe. Then she looked down, biting her.
Censored.
You don't feel it, he reminded her. You know you haven't felt what it means to want a mate. This is a strong pack. The moment you met your mate, you'd regret being with me. It would tear the pack apart. She said nothing, and he tried to think of a way to make this flattering to her. It means more than I can say that you would offer this, he said. Her head came up, a faint frown on her face. They asked something of you that they shouldn't have. It was true. That she had considered it was a separate problem, and not one he was going to bring up right now. They should never have wanted you to give up your own future. I will talk to them about that. They have to know that what they might think would be nice isn't a good reason to rearrange people's lives. He had kept his tone light, and she forced a laugh. So? That's your answer then? You know it's the right thing, he told her. Something was off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. When she smiled, his tension eased slightly. She shook her head and shrugged as she stood. I'm a little embarrassed. You should definitely be embarrassed for the elders, he said with feeling, and he smiled as he held the door open for her. He smiled at her as he set off down the hall, trying to ignore the feeling of her eyes on his back. Damn them. Damn them for telling her. Now it would be months before her embarrassment faded, embarrassment that she should never have had to deal with. She had tried, however inappropriate it was, to do what the elders requested in an open manner. She had offered him a chance. That was the question, wasn't it? What chance had she been offering him? He turned to look back down the hall, but she was gone, and he frowned as he set off once more. He was going to have to talk to her about it again, and he really did not want to have to do that. Damn Edward. The elders looked up as he came into the room, and he saw their eyebrows raise in surprise as they saw his expression. Did you need to humiliate her? He asked without preamble. Who? Edward asked. You know exactly who. You spoke to Alyssa. They met his eyes without a shred of remorse. Let me explain something to you, Jack said, fighting to keep control of his temper. I am the alpha of this pack. You embarrassed her once by talking to her, because all you were telling her was that she wasn't my pick. You told her to come after me. Did you spare a single thought for what that must have felt like for her? A few of them looked away, at that. I didn't think so. And after we spoke last time, you had no right to do that. Because, you know what you told me? You told me you were willing to abandon your principles, if I would only come into line. But those principles were as flawed as the offer. Jack, think carefully. Delia sounded almost panicked. What? Before I ask you to abandon a tradition that's done nothing for you? We're bear shifters. Her voice was fierce. And you would bring someone here who can't be one of us. You'd bring a half-breed who might get his mother's failures. They aren't failures. It's not wrong to be born a human. It's not wrong not to be a shifter. Polluting the bloodline is not a good enough argument, Jack interrupted. Have I failed you all in any way? Have I led the tribe to poverty, to danger? Do you have any reason to distrust me? They exchanged glances, and he knew they were on the edge of agreement. The door burst open before any of them could speak, however, and Jack turned to see one of the youngest sentries. He was gasping for air. Alyssa left. Left? Left the pack? No. The sentry looked almost sick. She took some of the younger ones, and said she was going to attack some wolf and her baby. The bottom dropped out of Jack's stomach. No, he whispered. Jack, Samuel was calling his name. But Jack was already gone, running as fast as he could for the exit. Chapter 6. He pounded along the streets, breath coming into his lungs in gasps. People gaped at him as he ran by, bundled in warm coats for the fall weather, and he ignored them. He was moving too quickly, faster than a human should. He told himself that people would not remember, that they'd assimilate it all into the vision of the world they expected, as people tended to, but the truth was that he didn't care. He only cared about one thing, and that was getting to Imogen and Damien before Alyssa did. He pounded up the stairs with his heart racing. One of the pack was waiting at the top of the stairs, trying hard to stand firm against Jack's rush. But he fell back with a whimper, looking away as a snarl burst from Jack's lips. Good. At least some people still remembered he was the alpha. Jack slammed his way into the apartment a moment later, his heart squeezing at the scene in front of him. Damien was staring down 4 members of his former pack, a low growl building in his throat. He looked over thankfully as Jack joined him. I should have known. Alyssa shook her head, contempt curling her lips. I should have known Damien wasn't dead. You weren't cut up enough about it. Everyone knew something was off, we just thought you were a great leader. A better alpha than you were. What the hell does that mean? You said you caught him with the wolf? You said you killed him for it. We saw that you didn't grieve, and we thought you were better than us, stronger than us. Her voice was thick with rage. I should have known you were too weak to kill him. A few minutes ago, you were trying to mate with me. Jack felt his own smile growing cold. What happened there? I was giving you a chance. Her voice rose. I was giving you one last damn chance to be the leader you were supposed to be. And you just proved that the elders did everything you accused them of. Huh? He exchanged a quick glance with Damien. They were trying to give me to some weak little beta, like a consolation prize. She could hardly speak for her rage. You had proved you shouldn't be our alpha, and all they wanted was to avoid some stupid battle for dominance. They wanted me to F you so you'd forget her. Where is she? I want to see this wolf who turned you into a weakling. Jack could only pray Imogen didn't rise to the bait and come out. He thought he could smell Liam, and every sense was on alert. Alyssa would be dead the second she took a step forward, if she wasn't careful. He was realizing he had never truly fought before in his life. He had never before been protecting his child. Alyssa. And I'm giving you another chance beyond that. Alyssa shook her head. I can't believe it. But better you make a choice tonight than the rest of them ever find out what you did. And what chance are you giving me? To come back. To be the leader you were supposed to be. If you stand aside, if you let us do what has to be done, you'll earn back some of our trust. And if you can face the challengers after that, you'll prove you still have what it takes to be alpha. Otherwise, you can rot in hell for all I care. I won't let you doom this pack. I'm dooming nothing. You are. You could have had any woman in the pack, and who do you choose? Some wolf. Did you want us to die out? I mated to her 3 years ago. He could have laughed at the horror on her face. And what's happened since then? Has the pack fallen? Have we been threatened? No. Never. We've prospered. We have homes, we have money. We're better off than we ever were before. She's ruined nothing up until now. Why should she ruin things now? Because now you've lost any shred of shame that kept you behaving like a self-respecting man. She shuddered with revulsion. She's an enemy. The wars are behind us. Shifters don't mix. Her yell broke the air. They don't. Ever. And is there a single damned reason why? We stood together against the vampires once. Hell, we stood with the vampires against the wolves. There's not an alliance in the underworld that hasn't been made and broken a dozen times if you look back far enough. There's not a single reason any of us have to be at each other's throats. We have enough problems from the humans. That's why we need our traditions. It's always been forbidden to interbreed. It's unnatural. No one bothers to forbid things if no one's doing them, Jack pointed out. People have always gone between tribes. Didn't you ever start to think whether the elders ever really had those hybrid babies killed? They said so, but they didn't. Did they tell you they'd have my mate killed so you could take her place? Yes. The word hit him like a blow. Had it been him they lied to, or her? It didn't even matter. What mattered was that Alyssa had accepted it. She had understood that she would take her place by spilling innocent blood, and she hadn't even blinked at it. That was what lay behind her matter-of-fact offer. She'd thought he would never have another mate to turn back to. He could hardly bring himself to believe it. "And you took the offer." "It wasn't an offer," she told him simply. "It was a condition." "You asked them to?" "How else could I ensure you do the right thing? You were already tainted. I don't know if I could ever have brought myself to touch you." Her lip curled. "But at least there would be no evidence of our shame once this cow was dead." Her fingers curled into a fist. "So where is she?" "You should leave," Jack said simply. "Where is she?" "You should leave." To his surprise, she only smiled. She gestured to the 3 males she had brought with her. "Kill him," she said simply. "Don't do it," Jack warned. "You know, I can kill any of you. Don't do it." They looked at him, brows furrowing, and then to Alyssa. "If you let him live, you let our pack be shamed," she told them. She crossed her arms. "Kill him. I will witness a challenge." Damien's voice was quiet and strong. He stepped between them, eyes sweeping over the assembled shifters. It took Jack a moment to see what his Omega was doing, and then he felt relief sweep over him. He had not wanted to kill these boys, but he had not known the words to dissuade them. Damien did. How had he lived without this man? A challenge? One of the boys looked like he was about to be sick. "Of course." Damien nodded to them all. "It seems a challenge is being issued. You came here to fight your alpha, a thing you must only do if you can take his place as the alpha of our pack. If you believe you can lead in his stead, keep your people safe as he does, and fight with more strength, then I will serve as your witness in this challenge." His face did not waver from its polite mask, but his voice was cold now. "Do any of you wish to issue a challenge?" There was a silence. The boys were shrinking back when a low growl caught their ears, and Alyssa launched herself at Damien. Fury erupted. Jack was between her and his Omega in a moment, the shift to bear form fluid and fierce. He was hardly aware of the claws sweeping out to catch Alyssa, but she had transformed as well, and her cry of pain was accompanied by a strike of her own. She crouched, gathering her strength for a leap past him, but he reared onto his hind legs, coming down with brutal strength. She never had a chance. She was strong, quick, but she was no alpha. She fought past where she should have, making one last, desperate attempt to get to Imogen, to Liam. And Jack, with strength he had never known he had before, drove his claws deep into her heart. He felt the life fade from her body, both of them shifting back as she died against him, blood bubbling at her lips. "Alyssa." He could hear horror in his voice. "Traitor," she whispered, and she slumped to the floor, eyes wide and staring. The sound of a child crying split the air, and Jack froze. But the others were not moving. They held their position as the child appeared, Liam running ahead of Imogen's desperate footsteps. Jack knelt in front of him, holding out his hands. "Hello, Liam." "Hello." The boy's lip was trembling as he looked around. "I heard animals." "Big animals?" "Yes." Jack reached out to draw him close. "But you're safe now." He looked over the child's head. "Is he?" The question hung in the air, and Damien's hands curled into fists. He was ready to fight. Ready to defend. But one by one, the others bowed their heads in acquiescence. They knelt, accepting defeat, and Jack stood with Liam in his arms. "Jack?" Imogen's voice was uncertain. "What's happening? What do we do now?" "We go back," Jack told her. "And we build the life we always should have had." Thank you for reading my book. Click here to read the alphas now. Or get 30% off when you buy the next ebook directly from my website. https://payhip.com/b/so8fz. Use exclusive discount code BACKFOR the alpha. About the author. Selena Coffey is a romance writer who lives happily in London with her husband and son. She is a hopeless romantic who grew up always believing in love, and she is not ashamed to admit this. It is this belief that makes her so passionate about writing crazy love stories. A stereotypical girly girl, she loves shopping. So whenever she gets a chance and the spare cash, you will probably find her browsing online for the next pair of shoes to add to her collection. You can find her online at www.selenacoffee.com. Contact her at hello@selenacoffee.com. Closing credits. This has been Kill Order. Written by Selena Coffee. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited.